Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
Welcome on into the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. You know, I kind of thought this show was going to be a little more boring.
Yeah.
But then we spent 25 minutes arguing about our 10 and 12 ranked quarterbacks. So it should be an interesting show. My name's Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me as always. We got some interesting stuff to get into in this episode. Obviously, QB rankings. We're going to talk about 10 to 12 guys. We'll see what happens. Before we do that, check out our website at thefantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter at the FFChamps, on Instagram at thefantasychampions. Like us at facebook.com/thefantasychampions. Subscribe wherever you listen, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube. If you are on YouTube, please leave a comment down below who your favorite quarterback for this season is, outside of Mahomes and Lamar. Outside of Mahomes and Lamar. You don't get to say that.
My guy's Mahomes.
Yeah, I know. Your guy is Mahomes every year.
It's always Mahomes, yeah.
Which is not the case on this podcast, but we'll find out. And then be sure to click the bell on YouTube for notifications when we release new podcasts. Be sure to leave a review, and we have an interesting, a little draft guide coming out in, probably a couple days, maybe next week. July 1st.
Yeah, it's approaching fast.
And I need some sleep because it's taken me forever to do things. Pre-orders on the draft guide start at $25. It has our full rankings, breakouts, busts, player draft values, written breakdowns, so much more that goes into this. Be sure to purchase before the price goes up in July. If you pre-order now, you will be entered for a chance to be in our listener league, and that will be running all the way until August.
Yeah. So, if you guys want a chance to beat us, this is your chance.
Yeah. Like I said, not going to happen. All right. So let's jump right into a quick question before we do our rankings. Tell me, my friend, what backfields are you avoiding? Just give me one backfield that you're avoiding this year. Running backs. That you're avoiding this year.
I kind of want to stay away from 49ers again, even though I like Raheem Mostert. But some of the stuff I'm hearing is just, it's not good. They're going to run the ball a lot, so Mostert might not be that bad. But, Tevin Coleman's going to get a lot of work, and I've been hearing a lot. I know you don't believe this. It's hard to believe, but I've been hearing a lot of hype for Jarrett McKinnon lately on Twitter and him making a big comeback. He's releasing workout videos, and Raheem Mostert is three-headed monster or something like that.
Wow, dude. Yeah, that's probably why they got rid of Breda.
Right. That is why, because he's just going to replace Breda. So it's going to be pretty much similar to what it was last year.
Now, this is an interesting question, and I was trying to think of the work, because I am okay with any backfield, really.
Yeah, me too.
And that's...
Go ahead.
What were you going to say?
I just have another team that I completely forgot about.
So I feel like there's a lot of things in flux right now, and I'm not really sure. The one team that keeps coming to my mind that scares me, there's really two teams, but I really can't say one of them because I'm in love with a player on that team at the running back position. But I'm going to say, I guess a backfield that I've been trending away from is the Detroit Lions. And
that's a good one.
I think a lot of people are going to be like, oh, DeAndre Swift, what are you talking about? They have great running backs. I'm not talking about the talent they got at the running back position. Right. I'm talking about the fact that Matt Patricia is a child of the Bill Belichick system, and that he's going to go RBBC all the way down people's throats. So I think you're going to see Swift. I think you're going to see Carryon. I think you're going to see the third guy, whoever that may be. But you're going to see a lot of different players get opportunity. When I projected the Detroit Lions out, I don't think I had a single one of their players hit 150 fantasy points at the running back position. Yeah. I have DeAndre Swift at 148 and Carryon at 143. So a little bit interesting of a dynamic there, but for me, it's like, I just don't see why, it kind of scares me to buy into that backfield right now. Like Kerryon might be an okay selection, for early in the season, especially if his schedule the first 4 to 6 weeks is easier. But I just think they're going to go very split with these two running backs, and it's going to look ugly next year. And a lot of people are going to draft Kerryon. A lot of people are going to draft DeAndre Swift, and they're just going to be shocked by the fact that, and I don't know why they would be shocked, but shocked by the fact that this team is going to run a committee next year. In the future, if you're in dynasty leagues, then buy DeAndre Swift with every penny that you have. But
I love Swift in dynasty.
Yeah, but in redraft, which is what we're here to talk about. Yeah, do not draft anybody in that Detroit Lions backfield.
Yeah, I was going to say the Patriots too, but then I thought of an even better team than that, the Rams. I'm not touching anyone on the Rams this year.
Oh, that's such a good one.
Cam Akers, I know there's a lot of hype for him, and I do think he's
totally forgot about the Rams.
Pretty talented running back, but Sean McVay has said this past year that he wants to do an RBBC. And that offensive line is, maybe it gets better. Like we were saying a couple shows ago, you were talking about how that it just could get better because it just underperformed last year. But if it doesn't, it's going to be one of the worst offensive lines in the league again. Yeah. With a rookie running back, Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown. I don't want to draft Cam Akers in the 5th or 6th round. I'm sorry.
Right. That's very fair. That's a great one. The Rams are trouble this year in so many ways. That'll do it for the quick question to start the show. We are going to jump right into our running back rankings and give you those. Quarterback ranking. It was written
you're
right.
a little behind.
I'm stuck on last week's Tuesday's episode. So let's talk about some quarterback rankings. This is going to be a little more interesting. It'll start off boring, so we'll move fast through the first three.
Yep.
1 and 2, we have a little bit of a disagreement. It's probably not going to be a big argument or discussion.
No.
But anyway, so we'll talk about Mahomes first. I have Mahomes 1. You have Mahomes 2. Having Lamar 1 on your list, which is the only other guy that you would assume that is there, is not horrible. But the reason why I have Patrick Mahomes 1 is not only because I statted him out to be 1, but it's because I don't see Lamar. I gave him 30 to 40 more passes this year, and he still doesn't reach 3,500 passing yards. And he only has I regressed him in the touchdown category, less efficient there, 26 passing touchdowns. What did he have last year? 33?
36.
36. Oh my goodness. So I regressed him 10 total touchdowns in that category. He only throws 7 interceptions on my projections. But the big thing that I regressed him in was rushing attempts, because I don't think he's going to rush it as much. But not necessarily rushing attempts. I have him at 160, which is a lot more than any quarterback in the league. And more than most running backs, to be honest with you. But I have him at 960 rushing yards. What he did last year, rushing the football, was phenomenal. It was maybe the greatest rushing. It was the greatest rushing performance that we've ever seen from a quarterback. Plain and simple.
Hard to top.
It's hard to get back to 1,000 yards rushing as a quarterback in the NFL. So to just assume that he's going to ascend into that, automatically get 100 fantasy points just on rushing yards is silly. Now, I do have him at 960, but I could see him at around 900 next year as a real number. And then I have him at 6 rushing touchdowns. So with the rushing, it's really the numbers are really solid for him. But I think there was enough to pull away in terms of just solid regression in every single category that it puts him kind of in the conversation of 340 to 350 fantasy points total on the season. And I have Mahomes right now at 38 passing touchdowns and 4,700 yards. I think he's going to pass it a little bit more this year. Mahomes is. But he doesn't turn the ball over literally ever. And he also does his fair share of rushing and scoring on the ground. So, it's not Lamar level. Like I only have him at 200 rushing yards, but so I have Mahomes at 364 just on sheer like passing touchdowns alone. If you were in a 6-touch, I think in your projections, you had 6-point touchdowns. Mahomes was number one. So if you're in a 6-point touchdown for quarterbacks league, Mahomes needs to be the number one guy on your list. If you're in a 4-point, it's close between Mahomes and Lamar, but to me, I think Mahomes has the edge. I don't think quarterbacks repeat. I've always been that way, but if you have either one of these guys, by the way, you're safe. Like you have 350 plus.
Oh yeah, I mean,
if they play all 16.
It's funny because I'm usually the Mahomes truther, and you have Mahomes ahead of Lamar, and I have Lamar ahead of Mahomes. But the only reason I have Lamar, I actually have Lamar projected less rushing than you do, and I still have him number one with total points. I also think he's going to regress. He has to after the year he had last year. But even if he regresses, man, if he rushes for 900 yards and 6 rushing touchdowns, throws for you have him 26 passing touchdowns. I think if he can get like 27, 28, 29 passing touchdowns, then there's a very good chance he's going to be the QB1 again. If anybody can repeat, I know I said this for Mahomes last year, but it's sort of the same thing because Mahomes got injured. So if Lamar Jackson doesn't get injured, he's either going to finish 1 or 2. I don't really think he's going to finish anywhere below that, just by the amount of times he rushes the ball. I think
the unfortunate thing is that if you look at, and I want to see if I can pull this up, just overall league ranking on Pro Football Reference. But if you look at the touchdown rate of what Lamar had last year, I think he was
it was ridiculous.
I think he was at 9. Let me see. I think it was 9%.
Yeah, that's why I have him for. You have him for 10 less touchdown passes. I have him for 7 less. Yeah. So, and I love Mahomes. Don't get me wrong. I have 3 fantasy points total on my projection.
Yeah, it was 9.
These two guys.
His touchdown percentage was 9. I'm trying to see what that correlates with the rest of the league.
It's high. I've looked at the number before. It is high. But I do love Mahomes, and again, if you can get one of these guys, you're going to be set at quarterback. Although I don't recommend drafting either of these guys in the second round, which is where they're going right now. Even though I was tempted to take Lamar in the mock draft, but that's a different story.
Always.
But no, I just the only reason I have Lamar ahead of Mahomes is just because his rushing is so great, and even if he does regress, like we both think he will, he's still going to have a monster season, and we're kind of hoping Mahomes is more like he was 2 years ago versus last year, even though last year he was still ridiculously good. And I think he will be more like he was when he won the MVP. But it'll be like, I don't think he's going to be throwing 50 touchdowns. Like
right.
You have, how many projected touchdowns do you have, Mahomes?
38.
Yeah, I'm at like 36. So I think that's the only difference.
Yeah. I guess that knocks out the first two guys, but one final thing on Lamar. It was just that, like I said, the touchdown rate that really set me off in terms of regression because, an average touchdown rate for a quarterback in that category of like top 5, top 6 is around 5 to 6%. And he was just so that whole Ravens offense was so ridiculously efficient that it is hard to not regress the entire offense into the point where, and this is the same exact way I feel about Russell Wilson, who we'll talk about in a few minutes, is that, when you're that efficient, it just can't keep up. You cannot continue to be as efficient as you were. You may be a good quarterback in the league, but I just, all of the factors that kind of ensue, like the other thing too, that you have to think about between Mahomes and Lamar is that Lamar has a lot higher risk of injury because of the way he plays.
True.
And with Mahomes, if you're into drafting quarterbacks high, or you're in a super flex league and you need to draft a quarterback high, right, in the first, second, third round, I would say that I would rather have Mahomes over Lamar just on the pure fact. Like if Lamar plays all 16, there's a good chance that he does outscore Mahomes. But I think that when you're talking about injury risk and stuff like that, even if I had statted out Lamar Jackson to be the number one quarterback in all of fantasy, I probably would have taken Mahomes one just because there's a chance that Lamar gets hurt and Mahomes, he got hurt on a freak sneak play last year. And you know what I mean? Lamar is all over the field running around. Like it's, you can only last so long doing that. And so I think the injury risk is higher, which means the risk of the player is higher. And if you were in the second, third round taking a quarterback, it is no time to be taking massive risks. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I would take Mahomes just in that pure aspect. But if you have Mahomes or Lamar, you've got two of the best quarterbacks in fantasy football. You're like not even close to everyone else. So let's talk about the next guy. Number 3, Dak Prescott. For me, he's 3. For you, he's 3. So we agree on this guy. I think on the initial projection, I had Dak at like 6 in the early rankings. I don't know where you had him. I had him a little bit lower with Russell Wilson down.
I think I had him like 5 or 6 as well.
Right.
I have him in my top 3.
The big thing about Dak is that he doesn't cease to amaze me. I really want to regress Dak Prescott so badly because I just don't I don't believe in quarterbacks having straight repeat seasons like he did last year. He's a QB2 last year. So I don't believe that he, when the season ended, I'm like, Dak's not doing that again next year. That was my first initial thought, which is why I had him ranked lower. And then they drafted CeeDee Lamb, and they still have Amari Cooper, and they still have Ezekiel Elliott, and they have a really good offensive line, and they just signed one of the most pass-friendly freaking coaches in the NFL.
Don't forget about the homie Michael Gallup.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And who could forget Michael Gallup? No, but I think for me, Dak, everything for me in my heart points to Dak not having a good season. But then everything in my mind goes, look at the talent.
Yeah.
If he's going to throw it 600 times next year, which I don't project him at 600, I project him at 590. But if he throws it in that vicinity of 600 next year, like Aaron Rodgers used to do back in the day, it is hard for me not to think Dak Prescott's not going to be a top 5 quarterback. It's very hard for me not to have that in my mind. So I have Dak at 3. I think he's got a ridiculous. There is a chance that this guy could blow up this year and actually maybe even overtake Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and become the number 1 quarterback in fantasy. This could be not the dark horse guy, but a guy that, where is he going right now? ADP, 5th guy off the board. So, I believe in Dak this year. I'm hesitant. You know what I mean?
If Dak falls in any drafts, I don't like taking quarterbacks early, but if he falls in the 7th round, I'm probably jumping on that.
Yeah.
Cause I'm with you. I have Dak 3rd as well. And with Mike McCarthy as a coach, Dak threw the ball 596 times last year.
Mm-hmm.
And now if you have Mike McCarthy there, who, like you said, is a pass-heavy coach, I could very easily, a matter of fact, I expect Dak to throw the ball about 600 times this year. And if you're throwing the ball 600 times with that offensive line, with Zeke,
that's
with
too
Lamb,
much. That's too
Amari
much
Cooper,
for me
with
to
Michael
handle.
Gallup, he should put up
Don't let me
big
do
numbers.
it.
He should do really well. So
yeah.
I think we both agree with this one with Dak.
I think the big thing with Dak is that, and I don't even want to draft him there, but right now you have Mahomes at pick 17, Lamar projected at ADP at 18, Kyler at 49, Russell Wilson at 53, Deshaun Watson at 59, and then you have Dak Prescott at 60. So, if you're using my rankings to draft this year, you know what I mean, or Rick's rankings to draft this year, you're going to have Mahomes and Lamar off the board before you get to pick, but then you're going to let other people take Kyler, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, and you'll still have arguably a tier 1 quarterback. I would say tier 2, the cutoff is Mahomes.
He's tier 2.
But a tier 2 quarterback sitting there, and he's a high tier 2. He's not low tier 2.
Yeah.
So if you want to take a quarterback, early 7th round is not a bad place to do it. I like to shoot for guys, I like to stream quarterbacks and shoot for guys in the later rounds. But if he ends up slipping in drafts, then go out and get him. He's not a guy that's talked about. That might be his low ADP might be because he was projected to hold out and the ADP hasn't adjusted to him signing his tender and actually playing this year. So we'll have to see if that had an effect. But yeah, it is interesting to see that he is a 6th, 7th round pick right now. which is not a bad place to take Dak at all.
No, it's not at all. I'm with you.
Let's talk about the number 4 guy we have. You have, you know what? I'll just go off the next guy for me, and then we can discuss. But Deshaun Watson, I have at number 4. You have him at number 5. So I think the hardest part for me is that I think, obviously we know for quarterbacks, if you can rush, you're going to finish high. You know what I mean? If you can get over 350 rushing yards, you're gonna finish pretty high in fantasy football among quarterbacks, especially if you have the ability to throw the football like Deshaun Watson does. So I have him statted out this year at 4,100 passing yards, just over that, and 26 touchdowns. But the big thing is that he rushes it 88 times, and his career per rush, I think, is like 4.7. So I projected him probably right around 4.5 or 4.6. And he ended up with 450 rushing yards. And I gave him 4 or 5 rushing touchdowns. Deshaun Watson has always been a rusher. The concerns are with passing this year. You lose, DeAndre Hopkins. They bring in David Johnson, which I don't, he's a great addition, but it's not, it's not one of those things that's going to throw
nowhere
you
near
off.
Hopkins.
Right. It's not going to compensate what you lost in Hopkins. Yeah. So I think, for Deshaun Watson, the question is, this is where we find out if he is actually a good NFL, we know he's a good NFL quarterback, but this is where we find out if he actually can perform without elite talent. And you know what I mean? That's kind of what separates you from being, 11, 12 or 13.
Good and great.
Yeah. Good and great, essentially. Yeah. So I think for me, when you look at Deshaun Watson, I don't think he's going to throw it 600 times this year. I think he's going to throw it right around 550 to 560. But I think that there's opportunity for him there, even if he has not a great season passing the football. Like I said, 4,126 touchdowns is not great passing the football. It's good, but it's not fantastic. So I think as far as rushing the football, that's what's going to bring him over the top. And I think he's not a bad pick. Now, I think where his ADP is, it's kind of gross. Being as the 5th quarterback off the board in the 5th, 6th round, it's a gross pick, and I'm not a huge fan of it. So, I mean, this is where these are guys that I just, the next couple I'm just not really super excited about. But
I'm not super excited about Watson. I'm probably not going to own him in many leagues unless he falls. You said you think he could throw like 550, 560 passing attempts this year.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at 2018, he played a full 16-game season. He threw for 505 passing attempts. Last year, he only played 15 games, so he did miss one game, but he still only threw the ball 495 times.
Right.
I don't think he's going to throw the ball more than like 5. I have him at, I think, 530, and I was, adding a few here and there. So I don't think he's going to throw the ball a crazy amount. He will be fine rushing the ball. I think it's going to be similar to what he did last year, which is good.
Right.
Even without Hopkins, I still think he can throw like 26, 27 touchdown passes. And maybe he'll throw like maybe a little bit over 4,000 yards. But I don't think I don't think he's in the same level as a Lamar or Patrick Mahomes, especially now with Hopkins gone. He's good. He's a top 5 fantasy quarterback in my opinion, but he's 5th. And he's kind of not worth a 5th round pick where he's going right now, 5th and 6th round.
So when you look at how many times he finished as a QB 6 or a QB if he finished as a top 6 or a top 12 quarterback last year, he only did top 12 finishes about 10 times. I think it was 9 or 10 times. And then the rest of the time, he didn't play week 17, and he had 5 what I would consider bust games. So I mean, you had this problem last year when you drafted him in our home league. You basically drafted him, and then halfway through the season, you were so freaking frustrated. I think it was week 6 you were talking to me about it, and you were so frustrated with having him on your team.
I was.
Because up to that point in week 6, he had been the QB3 in fantasy, and then the QB22, and then the QB5, and then the QB22, and then the QB1, and then the QB16. So it was like he would have these top 5 weeks for the first 6-7 weeks of the season, and then the other 3 times he played, he happened to lay an egg.
Terrible.
And you ended up suffering because of that. Because in a league where you have 5-6 point touchdowns, quarterbacks are very important. And if you have a bad performance from a quarterback, you lose games. And in our league, we're 5 points touchdown, 5-point touchdown for quarterbacks. So the quarterback position is a little bit more important. And you didn't get that performance from him. So I think inconsistency is a little bit of a problem for Deshaun Watson. Will he score in the top 5? Yes. But I think there's a lot more red flags surrounding Deshaun Watson this year than a lot of people believe. But I still have him 4. I think he finishes 4 or 5. Let's move on to the next guy, though. Kyler Murray. You know what? Never mind. We'll start an argument. Russell Wilson. So you have Russ 4.
I do.
And I have Russ 8. Why do you have Russ 4?
I'm more curious as to why you have him 8, because I feel like that is more of a anomaly than me having him 4.
4. No, yeah, well, that's for true. Yeah. I just wanted to hear you talk first.
But okay, so the reasons I like Russell Wilson, I do agree with your premise of he's really efficient, and your argument is, it's hard for somebody to continue to do that. But Wilson has also done that his whole career. It's not something like a 1-year thing. Like the year before that, he threw 35 touchdowns. I mean, if you look at 2017, he threw 34 touchdowns. He was pretty efficient. 2018, he threw 35 touchdowns on 427 pass attempts. That's like Lamar Jackson type of his efficiency.
Right.
And then last year he was a little less efficient, but he was still pretty efficient. 516 pass attempts, 31 touchdowns. With the injuries of Rashad Penny, not everybody. Chris Carson, there's a lot of question marks going into this year, which is why in drafts he's kind of fallen around. He's more of like a 4th-round pick because there's some injury questions, fumble questions, the usual with Chris Carson. There's a lot of people that believe with DK Metcalf now emerging in his second year. They have Tyler Lockett. There's talks about Antonio Brown potentially. There's talks that, the Seahawks could be leaning to throw the ball a little bit more, because if Russell Wilson, his career high for pass attempts is 553.
Right.
So if they just throw the ball a little bit more at all, he's going to be like a Dak Prescott level player fantasy wise.
Okay.
And I do think efficiency, like, he can keep that up because he's been doing it his whole career. Like to me, I think he could easily throw like 30 touchdowns and only have 5 or 6 interceptions. And he doesn't run the ball like Lamar or anything, but he can run for 300 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns. And if he does that, I think he's going to be the QB4, which is where I have him.
So I'm just writing down a few numbers here. I want to give you. They also
did add Greg Olsen, Philip Dorsett, so some minor pieces, but some good role guys.
I wanted to give you, I think his first year, was it 2012?
Yes.
Okay, so here are his career finishes at the quarterback position overall. In 2012, he had 11. He finished as the QB 11. In 2013, the QB 8. In 2014 and 2015, he finished as the QB 3. And then in 2016, he was the QB 11, the QB 1 in 2017, and then in 2018, he was QB 9, and then in 2019, QB 4. So the years that he went to the Super Bowl, he was the number 3 guy, and then in 2017, he was the number 1 guy. Wait a minute. They didn't go to the Super Bowl in 14-15, did they?
No, I think they did.
Okay, I don't remember. It's been too long.
It was either 13-14 or 14-15.
The last 4 years are the years I want to highlight. 11-1-9-4. If that continues to be a trend, Russell Wilson will finish as the QB 8 or 9. And so that's not the reason why I have him there. I just thought that was interesting. Yeah. The reason, so the big thing is like you said, he always performs and is efficient, and that's just Russell Wilson. We know that. But I think at some point efficiency does come to bite you in the butt. And I think you see that in years where he finishes 8, 9, or 11, you know what I mean? And then there's years where he goes off and has a really great season. I think the big thing about the Seattle Seahawks is that they're let's not front. They're a running football team. You know what I mean? They love to run the football.
Yeah.
And I have right now Russell Wilson projected at 540 pass attempts, which is a little bit on the lower end. It's not one of the lowest, but it's a little
540, you said?
Yeah, 540.
That's actually a lot. That's more than I do.
I have a lot of 600s, though.
Yeah. Well, yeah, compared to the rest of the league.
And compared to the other top 10 quarterbacks, that's outside of Lamar and Josh Allen, who rush the football a lot. That is I think that's the lowest total among the top 10. So for me, I think he's going to continue in that same, venue of throwing 530, 540 pass attempts. And I think it's going to, he's going to have a really good season, but I just don't think it's going to be a prolific, top 5 quarterback season, because we talked about Russell Wilson last year having a decent year last year anyway, because of how he, has been a QB3, a QB1, a QB4, you know what I mean, over his career. So we were like, yeah, Russ could have a good season, but I think, that we've passed that point, and I think Russell Wilson could be I don't know. I kind of scared of Russell Wilson. I don't know what it is.
No, I think it's efficiency. Wilson.
My whole life, no.
But would you consider the fact that, or would you make the argument that this might be the best receiving core Wilson has had?
Yes, I would say that. I think, obviously you have DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and if you had Antonio Brown, that's absurd. But
I mean, if they had Antonio Brown, then
I don't think that changes the play style. You know what I'm saying? I don't think that changes how.
But could that help the efficiency?
See, I don't think it helps the efficiency, because the efficiency is already ridiculously good. You know what I'm saying?
Right, but it might not, because one of your arguments is that, efficiency, it's hard to sustain, which I do agree with. But if it's one of the best, if not the best,
the big thing for me,
receiving core.
The big thing for me, I guess, is I have him right now at 27 passing touchdowns, which is, pretty low. Obviously, it's one of the lowest of the top 10. And so I think he's going to finish between 7 and 9. But I think guys that draft him in as a top 3 quarterback or a top 4 quarterback are going to get burnt. They're going to be, shocked by the fact that Russell Wilson doesn't perform at that level. So for me, I mean, it's not a problem to rank him at 4 or rank him at 5. But I just think knowing what Russell Wilson is and knowing how efficient he has to be, and knowing that the Seattle Seahawks have transitioned their whole team into more of a run-heavy, or run-friendly offense, I just don't see those days of Russell Wilson being a number 1, number 2, number 3 quarterback in all of fantasy football to still be there, because you have the Mahomes, you have the Lamar Jacksons, you have the Dak Prescotts, you know what I mean? And it's like those guys are going to be there. And then there's younger players who are coming onto the scene that could, potentially explode. I mean, every year we get a quarterback in the 20s who turns into a top 5 quarterback. You know what I mean? So it's like Russell Wilson has to contend with all of that. So it's like, for me, I think 7 to 9 is fair. But at the same time, if I'm ranking him at 7 to 9 and you're drafting him as the third, quarterback off the board, your team's, if you're following my projections and my rankings, your team's probably not going to have Russ because he's drafted way too high. So,
well, yeah, I mean, I'm probably not drafting a lot of these guys that we're talking about. I'm probably not drafting Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, some of the guy we're probably going to talk about next. Like just because I think they're, and even Dak, I think just because they're all going a little early. But I do think Russell Wilson is probably the best, other than Dak. But I would take Russell Wilson over Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. I think we should move on. What do you think?
Yeah, let's move on.
So I have let's see, who are we going to talk about next? Kyler Murray.
Yeah,
let's talk about Kyler. So Kyler Murray is number 5 on my list. He's number 6 on yours. Not too far off in terms of rankings and projections. What is this, our 7th quarterback that we talked about?
I think he's our 6th.
So, yeah, I have Kyler at 5. I think the consensus right now is that Kyler is going to explode.
Uh-huh.
And he's going to have a really, really great season. But right now, his total, his rankings right now have him at, his ECR rankings have him at number 5 as well. So, but he's going off the board. What did we say, 3?
Yeah.
So he's going off the board high. He's not Baker Mayfield. A lot of people are like, oh, he's going to bust like Baker Mayfield. I'm like, no, he's not Baker Mayfield. It's a similar situation as to what happened last year, but the big difference is, like last year when you statted out the Cleveland Browns, or this year when you stat out the Cleveland Browns, you look at Baker and you're like, oh my God, it's how is he going to even reach 520 pass attempts? You know what I mean? Like you're reaching, trying to get him up there. Whereas Kyler is probably going to have like maybe around 600 like pass play calls. Now, 80 of those will turn into rushes, but you know what I mean? You're talking about him throwing the ball, 540 times in a season. And it's like, that's right there with Russ, but he does 3 times more rushing than Russell Wilson. So for me, I think, it just, for Kyler Murray this year, it really all depends on his efficiency through the air. It took him a while last year to get on the pony. You know what I mean? I don't think he had a higher than a number 7 QB finish in all of fantasy football. So his biggest issue was scoring touchdowns. And I think that's the question that you're going to have this year is, can Kyler Murray get into that conversation of being a top 5 quarterback? It's all going to rely on how many touchdowns he scored. And right now I have Kyler projected at QB 11, which is low, with 28 passing touchdowns, but he doesn't reach 300. He doesn't reach 4,000 passing yards. So I do have him a little bit lower in my projections, but I don't know. I don't know if that's a scary factor that should force me to move him down, but I think that's just based on numbers that he's had in the past. And I think that this year he could have an explosion. But there's also a real possibility that he also doesn't have that, and he ends up being a mid-range QB like Baker Mayfield was last year. He's being overdrafted. Let's not front. I do
agree that he is getting overdrafted. I don't think you should move him down to 11, though.
No, I'm not going to move him down to 11. I would move him down to like 7.
Projection. I mean, I think I have him 7th on my projection, so I don't have him like in my top 5, but I have him ranked 6, so it's not really too big of a difference for me. For me, like, dude, I love Kyler Murray. I do think he is getting overhyped, though. I was hoping he wasn't, so I could draft him on my team. Yeah. With the addition to DeAndre Hopkins, his second year, full year as a quarterback. Cliff Kingsbury loves to throw the ball. They threw it, 442 times last year. I wouldn't be surprised if that number goes up to like 450, 460 passing attempts. With the amount of times he rushes the ball as well, like it's very possible. He rushed for 500 yards last year. Yeah, he can do that again this year with 4 rushing touchdowns. Like I think that's possible. And then efficiency wise, you expect that offense to be better as a whole with Kenyon Drake playing there for full season with the addition to DeAndre Hopkins. Yeah. So I think he can throw like 26-ish touchdowns. Yeah. And if he does that, he'll finish as a top 6 fantasy quarterback. I don't think he's Baker Mayfield, but it does scare you a little bit because of the hype that is going around Kyler Murray. It's just scary. It's a scary, similar situation. Right. Still a crappy football team, but they add, some good offensive weapons. They know what they are. The offensive line is improved. It's everything points in the right direction for Kyler. And I think the one common denominator that's not the same between the two teams is that, he's probably going to get a lot more opportunities to touch the ball in general whether you're talking about passing it or running it than Baker did last year. The team though too isn't the same. It's not on. He's getting drafted as the 3rd quarterback off the board. It's higher than Baker. I know, but like the hype for the Browns last year as a whole was like they're going to the Super Bowl. Right. Like nobody's really expecting the Cardinals. People are projecting them to go 16-0. Yeah, right, which is ridiculous. So I don't think Murray has quite the same pressure as Baker did. He still has a lot of pressure on him, though.
Because the Cardinals still suck.
But right, because the Cardinals are like probably going to go 8-8 this year.
Poor Cardinals. Let's move on to the next guy, Josh Allen. I have him 6. You have him 7. I think I have him at 304, which is like, this will be surprising to you. The difference between 6 and 9 to me is 3 fantasy points in projections.
Yeah, no, that's not crazy.
So anyway, Josh Allen, we all know the interesting thing when I was projecting guys is looking at last season's numbers and seeing the top quarterbacks in fantasy football who did not get over 4,000 pass yards. And Kyler was one of those guys. You saw Josh Allen, one of those guys. Lamar Jackson was one of those guys. So Josh Allen is just not a good, like when you watch him on film, he's not. He makes some really good passes, but he's just not good at throwing the football.
Yeah.
He's not really a great quarterback.
Right.
He ran.
This is the grossest guy on our list.
Oh, yeah, for sure. He had, I think, the second most rush attempts last year, maybe the third most rush attempts last year among quarterbacks. I have him at 105 rush attempts this year, second in the league with 535 rushing yards and 7 rushing touchdowns. That's what puts him that high on my list, just the rushing metrics. Last year, I think he led his own team in rushing touchdowns, which was absurd. In the 2 seasons that he's played, I think he had like six rushing touchdowns his first year and 7 in the next year. And if he does that again, there's no way he doesn't finish in the top 7 of quarterbacks in fantasy football. The real question is, do guys like Stefon Diggs, and Devin Singletary getting full-time work and improvements, in other parts of the game, Dawson Knox year 2, do those elements elevate Josh Allen's passing game to the point where he can maybe ascend into the top 5? I've heard people reference Josh Allen, who's going, I think, in the 9th round right now, Josh Allen as the Patrick Mahomes of this season, of what Patrick Mahomes was in 2018 or Lamar Jackson was in 2019. So, we always talk about the QB1 ascending into the top 3, getting a massive breakout for a quarterback. And, you look at it and like, it's not always the Lamars in the 14th round. Mahomes was a guy that you drafted in the 9th round, and he was an ADPing at the 9th or 10th round the year that he went off. And what do you have, Josh Allen right now at in the 9th round? So it's like, does Josh Allen have that explosion breakout wise to the point where he throws maybe 30 touchdowns, rushes it for 500 times, has those 7 rushing touchdowns, and it all comes together for him in the same year where he becomes the QB1? That's the conversation that I think a lot of people aren't having with Josh Allen, even though he's completely disgusting. I've heard a couple of people say that, and I looked at it and I'm like, nah, that's not going to happen. And then I started looking at the numbers and I'm like,
yep,
that could happen. And as the QB6 on my rankings, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's funny because Josh Allen is like, he's my least favorite guy on this list. And at the same time, he's my favorite guy on this list.
It's the rushing. It's always the rushing.
Yeah, it's the rushing, dude.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you look at his rookie season. He played in 12 games, right?
Right.
He had 8 rushing touchdowns in 12 games as a rookie. So you're thinking, there's no way he does something like that again.
Yeah.
He plays a full 16 and he gets 9 rushing touchdowns. So the idea is like, I think his rushing is going to regress.
Yeah.
But he's had such great rushing seasons in 2 straight years. It might not. And I have him regressing a little bit.
It's so gross though.
Yeah, it is really gross. I regret him like, I think I still have him with like 500 rushing yards, but I have him at 7 touchdowns instead of 9. Even if he gets like 5 or 6, though, like he's still going to be really good from that. And I do think he's going to be better passing the football this year because they added Stefon Diggs, who is going to make a big difference in that offense. Fantasy-wise, he might not do anything insane, but on the field, like that's going to make a big difference for Josh Allen and for how teams play the Buffalo Bills. And not to mention the fact that, you just look at his year-to-year improvement.
Mm-hmm.
He's going into the 3rd year of his career. He's 24 years old.
Yeah.
his rookie season, he was terrible. He had 10 touchdowns, 12 picks, threw for like 50%.
Mm-hmm.
But then last year he threw he was still under 60% for completion percentage, but it got higher. It was 59% or around there. He had 20 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 3,000 yards. So if he improves again off that just a little bit with his rushing, he has a chance to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback.
Yeah, maybe even top 3. A little bit.
And he's got that kind of upside. Yeah.
Yeah.
If he rushes like he did last year and has a better season throwing the ball because of Stephon Diggs, which is very possible, he could be this year's Lamar Jackson.
I mean, and I think too, when you're talking about, because right now I believe he's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9th quarterback off the board. That seems like good juju to me. I like that. I don't know, man. I might be targeting Josh Allen this year. Can he be a breakout in 2 straight years? Is that a thing?
Yes, I think so.
Can you do that? All right, let's move on from Josh Allen and talk about Carson Wentz. Interesting. This is going to be an interesting conversation on Carson Wentz because his whole career has been kind of a cluster. His MVP season, which is what everyone refers to when they talk about Carson Wentz being a, QB1, top 10 quarterback in fantasy football, a guy who can break out. He was on pace to be the number 1 quarterback in fantasy that season. He went for MVP until he tore his ACL. He was one of the best quarterbacks in fantasy football that season. I think it was 2017? Can't remember.
Yeah, 2017.
So then he tore his ACL, came back the following year, and wasn't as good as we thought. And then last year he wasn't as good as we thought. I think he dealt with injuries in 2018 as well. So it just it was a lot of up and down for Carson Wentz. And I think the only time that we've seen him be a QB1 was over that stretch of 10 weeks before he tore his ACL. And since then, we just really haven't seen it. And whether that's because the Eagles just don't have any passing targets outside of Zach Ertz, or it's because Carson Wentz maybe isn't that great, or the offensive line hasn't been as good as we thought it was, whatever that may be, Carson Wentz has had a hard time getting himself back into that top 7, 8 conversation. If he plays all 16 this year, he'll get there. I went a little. What did you have him at pass attempts and projections?
I think 600 exact.
I have him at 604. I throw him 28 touchdowns, 4,653 yards. He rushes it for 200 yards and scores 1 little touchdown. And he gets top 5 in my projections at 310 fantasy points, ahead of Matt Stafford, Josh Allen, and Drew Brees. So can this be the year that Carson Wentz comes out? I feel like I'm playing devil's advocate with my own brain. But can this be the year that Carson Wentz comes out and gets himself back into that conversation of being a top quarterback? That's where we're going to start having discussions. But outside of... Go ahead.
I was going to say, this is why I'm not taking a quarterback in the 5th round. Because Josh Allen, because Carson Wentz, because a few guys we're going to talk about after him, all have potential to be in that top 5 category.
ADP 96 for Carson Wentz.
Yeah, and I've seen him fall in the 10th round in almost every mock draft I do. And to me, there's really not a big difference between Carson Wentz and Deshaun Watson. It's not a huge difference fantasy-wise.
Yeah.
It's 15, 20
You're going to get some hate for that.
In my projections. I know I'm going to get some hate for that, but I don't.
No, but it's true. The overhype
taking one in the 5th
for
round
Kyler,
the
Deshaun,
11th round.
The overhype for Kyler, Deshaun, you know what I mean, and where they're getting drafted. It's much better to take a Josh Allen or a Carson Wentz at the back end of the top 10 rounds than it is to go after a freaking stud quarterback.
Just because you can still get a great wide receiver running back in the 5th round. You can't. It's very hard to get a great running back in the 10th round. But you can still get a good quarterback in the 10th round, like Carson Wentz.
Right.
But yeah, no, my argument for Carson Wentz is, last year he only had 27 touchdowns and 7 interceptions with 4,000 yards, but he was throwing to Nelson Aguilar. He was throwing to Dallas Goedert. He was throwing to Alshon Jeffrey on one leg through 6 games. He only had Deshaun Jackson for the first 2 weeks of the season. Now you have a healthy Deshaun Jackson. You have Jalen Reagor in there now. You had added Marquise Goodwin. You have Zach Ertz fully healthy.
Yep.
Dallas Goedert is still there. So there, and if Alshon Jeffrey goes on the PUP, I mean, it's whatever, but he'll come back too. So if
he's definitely got more options.
Yeah, he has more options. And if Jeffrey comes back and everybody else stays healthy, like if that's what he has to work with, I think he has the potential to finish in the top 5 for quarterbacks, which I think is worth taking in the 10th round. Because even if those guys get injured again, it's a similar season last year, his floor is still decent. Like he's still going to be like a top 12, top 13 fantasy quarterback.
Yeah. Totally agreed. Love Carson Wentz for 2020. Let's talk about Matt Stafford and try to wrap this show up here.
Sure.
We'll talk about Stafford, Ryan, and then my goodness, there's some guys here. There's some guys, Rick, that we wanted to get to, but I don't know if we're going to get to them.
We can just quickly talk about Stafford because we both have similar opinions.
So Stafford, I have at 9. You have Stafford at 10. Very similar ranking. Stafford, to me, is one of probably the best values in the draft. Yep. I think right now ADP of 112, and that's a 12th round pick. And it's like, if you can get Matt Stafford, who was on pace to being, a top 3 quarterback last year, in the 12th round, the value is insane. We talked about it before. And so I think as far as projections are concerned, I have Stafford right now at 304 fantasy points, right around where Josh Allen, Drew Brees, Russell Wilson fall. But I have him at 592 pass attempts. And I think he's going to hit that total, and he's going to throw a lot of touchdowns this year. You have Marvin Jones, you have Kenny Golladay, you have Kerryon Johnson, you have the newly added DeAndre freaking Swift, you have TJ Hawkinson. You got all the red zone targets in the freaking world. And on the plus side, both of your running backs are not boulders. So they're not Marshawn Lynch's. They're going to throw the ball on the goal line. And Matthew Stafford's going to throw a lot of touchdown passes this year. I don't think he's going to finish as a top 4 or top 3 quarterback in fantasy, but I think he's for sure one of those guys you can get in the 12th round. And then later in the draft, kind of have a conversation about maybe drafting a Gardner Minshew, or maybe drafting, somebody who may have a Joe Burrow or something like that to potentially break out. But Stafford is a great value at the quarterback position, going in the freaking 12th round. So for me, having him as the 9th pick, I mean, that's, the 9th guy off the board we just talked about being, what was it? Josh Allen. And right now I have Matt Stafford as my 9th guy, and he's going as like the 16th, 17th quarterback off the board. So it's like that value right there is just very good.
Well, that's the thing. Stafford is in this, and it's another reason why I'm not drafting a quarterback early. It's because I think Matt Stafford, again, is somebody who can be very, very good that you can get in like the 11th round, who's a quality quarterback. And I don't want to talk too much about Matt Stafford because I've talked to him before on the podcast, and there's a great article on our website about Matt Stafford. So our feelings about Matt Stafford, but he's going to throw a lot of touchdowns. He's going to throw a lot of yards. If he stays healthy, like he's going to be a top 12 fantasy quarterback who you can get in the 11th round at a good price.
Let's talk about Matty Ice. I have him 10, you have him 9.
So we just swapped.
Here's the big thing with Matt Ryan. Talked about it last year. Matt Ryan does this thing, this really funny thing where he swaps year to year.
Yep.
It's ever been consistent for like the last 7 years, where he has a really great fantasy season and then he falls off. And then he has a really great fantasy season, and then he falls off. And then he has a really great fantasy season. Last year, he had a good fantasy season, but it was not as good as the previous year. This year, Matt Ryan's coming in, and you ask the question, can he have a big-time fantasy football season where he ends in the top 5 and has one of his Matt Ryan-like seasons? I think the older he gets, the harder it gets for him to do something like that. They added Todd Gurley. They still have Calvin Ridley. They still have Julio Jones. They have Hayden Hurst to replace Austin Hooper. And so it's like their offense is still good. It's still a very good offense. They got skilled players. They got weapons. Matt Ryan's going to have a good year. It's just a matter of like, he's not going to be a fantastic. My problem with him is that he's what you get when you draft him. We have him at 9 and 10. He's going as the 9th or 10th quarterback off the board. So it's like, he's exactly where he should be. But I don't see him my thing is that if you're drafting him for the consistency that is Matt Ryan. and you're not drafting him for, hope that he's a top 3 quarterback. Now, for me, I'd rather stream and try to draft a guy late and build my skill positions and build my team through that venue than draft Matt Ryan and know that I'm going to get a consistent, 20 fantasy points a week, or maybe 18 fantasy points a week. So it's like for Matty Ice, I like him. He's going to be 9 on my list and he's probably going to stay there, maybe fall to 10, but, actually I have him 10, you have him 9. Sorry. He's going to stay probably 10 or 11 on my list, but he could have a really good season where he finishes 6 or 7. I just don't think there's like a big breakout top 3 season in Matt Ryan, especially with Matt Ryan's top 3 seasons were in the NFL where where quarterbacks didn't really run the football, and Ben Roethlisberger and Tom Brady and Drew Brees were scoring at the top 3, and Peyton Manning, right? And so it's like, now you got Matt Ryan, and it's like he doesn't really rush all that much, and he's a pocket passing quarterback. So it's like, right at 9 and 10 is probably where you should have him and where he will probably finish next year. And the new NFL, where you got Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray, Patrick Mahomes, Dak Prescott, and Lamar Jackson running it all over the field and getting fantasy points on the ground, it's going to be hard for Matt Ryan to crack the top 5. Even Josh Allen, for him to crack the top 6 is going to be difficult. So I think 9 or 10 is probably safe to have Matt Ryan, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, he's a safer guy, but you look at his, he's almost like guaranteed to throw the ball like 600 plus times.
Yeah.
And if he does that, he's going to put up some decent numbers. I do think his ceiling is limited, and he's not going to probably be a top 3 fantasy quarterback. Like, you're not drafting Matt Ryan for that. You're just drafting him to be a stable guy who gets you 18 to 20 points a week, like you were saying. And I still like him. I don't know how many years left he's got in him. Being a top, this might even be his last year that I put him in my top 10. Yeah. But he's still, again, he's got a good floor.
Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about Drew Brees really fast. Brees, I don't tend to rank old quarterbacks high, but Drew Brees is an exception. They throw it a lot, and if he stays healthy, he's gonna throw 35 touchdowns and 4,000 yards, and 4,500 plus yards and all that good stuff. So he's about as safe a pick as you can get in drafts. Right, I think last year in the games that Drew Brees played, he was a QB1 in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games out of, I think it was 11. So he's still got that, QB1 finishing potential. And I think that he'll continue doing that on a year-to-year basis. I mean, he was the QB 22 last year, and he only played 11 games. So I think he's a lock to be a top 12 quarterback in fantasy football. And I think he'll definitely do that, especially when you're talking about having, one of the best receivers, if not the best receiver in the game, in Michael Thomas. So it's hard for me to see a reality where Drew Brees doesn't finish as the 11th quarterback on the board, but you have him at 12. Explain.
Yeah, I actually wanted to even put Brees lower on this list, but after doing my projections, I was like, it's kind of hard to put him lower, just because of how efficient he is every single year. I mean, even last year, you look at, he threw 27 touchdowns in 11 games, which is ridiculous. So if he plays a full 16 this year, which I expect him to do, he's probably going to get around 30, 32 touchdowns because that offense is still very, very good. And they give it to Murray sometimes in the goal line. They give it to Kamara sometimes in the goal line, but they do like to throw it in the goal line a lot too. And so Brees is a touchdown machine. It's why he's in my top 12. It's hard to not put him there.
And Kamara being back full time is huge too.
Yeah, that's big. Again, though, it's scary to me for Brees because of how old he is. Yeah. And like he could just have like a year where he still plays good in the NFL, but has it like a year like Brady did last year where he throws like 24 touchdowns.
Yeah, it could happen.
And then he ends up being like,
I think the big thing,
waste of a pick.
Drew Brees' completion percentages are always so freaking high that it's like, it's hard for him not to have a really good fantasy season just because efficiency. So
right.
but
if I am picking Breeze, though, I do want like a younger guy to go with him.
Yeah. Let's talk about the final little discussion that we have here. So
sure.
I don't want to make it a Rodgers versus Brady debate, but I have Aaron Rodgers 12 and you have Tom Brady 11. I think you have Rodgers 17.
I do. I might move him up a spot or two.
So let me just explain why I have Rodgers 12 and why I think he's going to finish better than Brady and why I have Brady 17 on the flip side of that. So Rodgers, obviously he's been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I think we've talked about this before. I think the years of Rodgers being a prolific number one quarterback, those are gone. We know that they're over. It's not going to happen anymore. But last year, Rodgers was the QB 10. He had some really good games. He was consistent. You brought up before the show when we were talking about Rodgers or Brady. It was kind of like you basically said that Rodgers only has that one receiver and Brady's got the weapons. And that's very true. But Rodgers has never really needed the weapons to have success in fantasy football.
Sure.
So I think for Aaron Rodgers, he's going to have success. I think he finishes as, the QB 10 to 12. And he's not a bad pick. He kind of reminds me a little bit of this late career Drew Brees kind of play where Drew Brees is always a 10 to 12 kind of guy and is good enough to get you, wins in fantasy football. And it's somebody that you can safely pick and be like, okay, let's get a younger guy in the later rounds. Right now, Rodgers is in the 8th round, I believe, so it's a little high for him. I probably won't be taking him in a lot of my leagues just because I have him ranked and he's being overvalued among my rankings. So
it's just because of the name. Right.
It's just the name that makes him a little bit higher. But I think Rodgers is good, and I think he'll do some good things this year. As far as why I think he's better than Brady, I think a lot of people are forgetting that Brady, what is he, 43?
Yep.
So
old man.
Brady is very old. He's not just Rodgers. Rodgers is 37. Tom Brady could have babysat Drew Brees. That's ridiculous. Actually, Drew Brees is 39. I'm sorry. Is that right?
Drew Brees is like 41, dude.
He's 41. Too. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was talking about Rodgers is 36 or 37, correct?
He's turning 37.
So I think for me with Tom Brady is that, yes, he's got the weapons, but I think people are undervaluing. I think being in the New England Patriots system meant a lot for Brady. And I'm not saying that the Belichick made Brady or Brady made Belichick. I'm not in for that discussion. I think changing teams as a quarterback is a big thing. And it's why I have Phillip Rivers as like my 26th ranked quarterback. And it's why I don't really like Brady this year that much, is that he's got the talent and he's a good quarterback, but he's also 43 years old and he just changed teams. And like the reality that Tom Brady is going to come out and be a massive QB, a great play and a guy who ends up top 8 or something like that in fantasy football, which is what a lot of people really believe Tom Brady will do. It's hard for me to believe. And so for me, I have him a little lower in my rankings because I just don't want to buy a 43-year-old quarterback in fantasy football. And I'm a huge Brady fan. You know me. Grew up watching the man.
That's a fair argument.
Tom Brady is one of the reasons why I freaking love football, but it's over.
Right. See, that's where we disagree. I don't think it's over. Not quite yet. This is his last year from that I would ever consider having him in fantasy, even if he plays next year. But
see, that was supposed to be 3 years ago, but
right, I know. The Buccaneers, Bruce Arians loves to throw the football. They threw the ball 630 times last year.
Right.
And I'm not even saying Brady's going to throw that much. Let's say Brady throws like 600.
Yep.
Winston had a 60% completion percentage. I would expect Brady to be a little bit better than that because it's Tom Brady over Winston. Winston threw for 5,100 yards. I don't know if Brady's going to throw that much, but he might throw close to 5,000 yards. Winston had 33 touchdowns last year. I don't think it's going to be much different. I'd have Brady a little bit less, so maybe around like 30 touchdowns. And then the big difference, Winston had 30 interceptions last year. I think Brady's going to have a lot less than that. Brady has only thrown usually 8 interceptions a year.
Yeah.
He had 11 in 2018, I think. Mm-hmm. But it's usually around 8 interceptions. So if he has like 10 interceptions.
Yeah.
So Brady throws like 30 touchdowns with 10 picks and close to 5,000 yards. I think he's going to be really, really, really good.
Now,
it's one of the best weapons he's ever had. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Gronk, OJ Howard, Cameron Brate's there. Ronald Jones, Keyshawn Vaughn was one of the best pass catching backs in the draft. And then my argument against Rodgers is just, one, it is kind of weapons. His number 2 receiver is Devin Funchess and Alan Lazard.
Right.
So it's really just Devontae Adams. Although I do like Aaron Jones as a pass catching back, so he's solid. But even so, like the last 2 years, Rodgers, in 2018 he had 25 touchdowns. In 2019 he had 26 touchdowns. So he's only had 25 or 26 touchdowns the last 2 years. And if anything, the offense got worse weapons wise, and he's a year older. And I still projected him at 27 touchdowns, so I have him a little bit better actually. But I don't think he's going to do much.
Have you looked at the strength of schedule for Brady and Rodgers?
I did. I don't remember what it was.
So Tampa Bay right now, their strength of schedule right now gets 2 stars from Fantasy Pros, and it's ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th worst in all of football. That's part of the reason why I don't have Brady having as much success as he's had in the past this year. Like I gave him a little, not regression, but I gave him a little bit less in terms of efficiency just because he has a little bit harder of a schedule. And I think that offensive line is going to hurt him more than help him. Rodgers has 4 stars and he has a top 10 easy.
He has the 3rd easiest schedule according to Fantasy Pros.
Oh, really? Because I'm looking at it. It doesn't say that. Doesn't say that.
You just have to click on their name.
Oh, so anyway, he has a very easy schedule when it comes to next season. So I think you could see Rodgers throw 28 to 30 touchdowns. I think I told you before the show, I don't think Brady scores over 30, which is a hot take. I just think this is unfortunately, and if I was a Patriot, if he was on the Pats, I would have said this too. I think this is the year, and I'm not saying that he's gonna. What did Max Kellerman say on was it Fox Sports or ESPN? I can't remember. He's gonna fall off a cliff. I don't mean he's gonna fall off a cliff, but I think this is the year that Brady starts to see that he's 43 years old and Patrick Mahomes is 24 or whatever Patrick Mahomes' age is. You know what I mean?
I think it'd do much worse if he was on the Patriots, though.
I guess I think honestly, I'm telling you right now, system means a lot, and I think that there's going to be. Weeks 1, 2, and 3 are going to be fun for Brady, but then when things aren't going well defensively and Bruce Arians is being a dink, Tom Brady's going to be pissed. But Bruce Arians, he's turned Carson Palmer's career around, so maybe he can make Tom Brady a good fantasy quarterback again. I don't know. I've seen Tom Brady play for 20 plus seasons, and I think it might be just that time for Brady to. He's settling his career in freaking Tampa Bay. So
I think system does.
The hype is too much.
I think the Buccaneers have the best
hype is
system
too much
in the league for passing quarterbacks. They're one of them. Bruce Arians loves to throw the football. He wants to do whatever the quarterback wants to do. He wants to throw the ball deep. He wants to throw the ball medium. He wants to throw the ball short. He wants to throw the ball. He wants success at the quarterback position. He wants a lot of passing yards. He wants a lot of passing touchdowns.
Do you want Brady as the 12th quarterback off the board?
Yes.
Yeah, see, I don't.
I want him over Breeze.
I'm torn because I don't think it's a bad selection. Like if anybody goes out there and says that Brady's a sleeper and that he could have a really good season, like it's not a bad selection in my mind. I just think that it's hard to quantify, a long-term. Like for me, it's hard to quantify the long-term success of Brady over the course of the 2020 season because so many people are going to draft him. And Brady's going to go out and get 25 points a game for the first 5 weeks of the season. And then midway point of the season is going to come and things going to the Patriots were freaking undefeated through 10 games or whatever it was last year. And Brady was looking ridiculously good. And then all of a sudden it just collapsed. And it's like Brady's a 43-year-old quarterback and he knows how to pace himself. We talk about we're big basketball fans, and we talk about LeBron James all the time. One of the things LeBron James knows how to do is pace himself. He doesn't overdo it during regular season games, so he can be there in the postseason to perform because he's not young anymore, right? Tom Brady does the same exact thing. He goes on his stupid diet where he eats avocado ice cream, and he gets massaged by Alex freaking Guerrero, and he gets all of that stuff, right? But he also knows how to pace himself and not overdo it. And so I I think that kind of has an impact on what he does fantasy wise. And I think for me, it's not necessarily that I think Brady's going to suck. I think that it's his ceiling is like QB 10.
Yeah, I feel the same way about Rodgers. I feel the exact same way about Aaron Rodgers.
Okay.
But I do think like the pacing yourself thing, like does he have the choice to pace himself when he's on the Buccaneers versus the Patriots?
No, but I think that doesn't help him. Because by the time you get to week 8, by the time you get to week 8 and the guy has to play his butt off to win football games, it just gets like he's been a part of that before. And it just, I don't know, 43 years old. It's a hard thing to do.
He's not going to have to play in the snow anymore.
Yeah, that's for sure. But anyway, I have my opinions on Brady and I love him, but you never know. But that'll do it. That'll do it for all of the QB rankings that we have. We talked about 13 guys. Is that right?
Yeah.
So that'll do it for our QB rankings for the 2020 season, the top 12. You can get the rest of these and that draft guide we're releasing next week. Don't forget to check out our website, thefantasychampions.com, buy the draft guide, and follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We'll talk to you Tuesday.
Later.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.